Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars with Steve Shelton Jr. And if you have any idea about the world of exotic cars or Ferrari, you can't hear the Shelton name without thinking of what I associate with the Lauderdale Ferrari store. Now, did you have a second location, your family, Steve?
We had several locations. The Ferrari store was acquired by an existing dealer in '82, and then we moved across the state, opened a Jaguar Porsche Land Rover store in Naples, which is a nice little seaside village in the southwest coast of Florida.
What years did you have Jaguar Land Rover?
That was about 92 to 2004. Yeah, so we actually got Aston Martin shortly before we sold.
I think that's Terry Taylor now.
Correct, yeah. And I went on to have a short career with his group, AMSI. And then we built Land Rover in Fort Lauderdale in '94. And then we built a dealership in Fort Myers, not too far from where I'm sitting. And that was Jaguar Audi Land Rover on 41, which is like, 41. It's like US 1 on the East Coast, and, a very prominent coastal highway, 3 lanes each way and stuff like that.
Iconic name in the car business. It's amazing how you carry yourself. You're not just so full of your rightful celebrity stuff. You act like almost a normal human being.
Yeah, I'm still up early and to bed early type of thing. But it's been, I don't know anything else. I mean, it's just always been, people look at me cross-eyed and they say, how was it growing up that way? And that's really what I know. It was just a lot of fun, and you don't miss it till it's gone, because it's the business, and it's pretty high profile. It's pretty sexy, and customer events and things like that, and getting involved in motorsports, which is where we began, and that's where our association with the car business came from, is being involved in motorsport. My uncle was a real estate broker, and still is. And my dad was in the advertising business, but they were all the while involved in motorsports from the time they were like 20 until now. They're both still driving. So, and my dad's 73, and my uncle's going to be 79 in June. So
they were like Enzo Ferrari, where all of this business was just to support the racing.
Well, it ended up that way. I mean, they really got a really good deal buying the Ferrari store. I think the folks that were involved in it was kind of a big downturn, beginning of the 80s, and there wasn't a lot of really exciting product, and they really just got it in at the right time, and didn't overdo the facility, and had a lot of really good people around them, like anybody would say. Make sure you got people that are smarter than you working for you, and treat them right, and they're going to stay with you, and you form an allegiance that way. So yeah, not different from what I'm doing with my folks here. So
when they bought that store, this is when it actually took a sales skill to sell a Ferrari. It wasn't quite clients bringing a gift,
right,
to get on the list.
Yeah. It wasn't an order taking position. So yeah, I mean, the way I understand it, and I was there for it, but the way I understand it was they basically didn't turn down any allocation at all. They weren't afraid to accept vehicles that were not selling well, like the 308 4 valves and the Mondials, and things that were just kind of like, they're neat. I mean, if you drove it, you'd be like, wow, that's really cool. But they weren't like a sexy, like a Testarossa or the 400i or the 412. So those were all prominent in 83, 84. And they basically just said, just give them to us, we'll get them done. And they kind of did, and, lost some money on certain cars, but right. They, just like, yeah, I mean, you do what you got to do to get the cars that you want to get. You have to take the cars that you don't necessarily want. And, so that's what they did, and built a business and allegiance by clients. And, for a long time, I think forever, I think they got stung a couple of times, but they didn't charge anything over list price for any cars. I mean, they just
Now, was this at a time where they could have? Excuse the question.
Sure, they did. They did one time. They well, not one time. They got in trouble one time. As a good client of ours who was very picky, and I came in at the end. I was a service director at the Ferrari store in the late '90s, early 2000s, and he complained of inefficient air conditioning and a brake squeal that we couldn't get rid of on his F40. And Florida lemon law, was at that point was 3 complaints within 24 months of ownership, and then you get one final repair attempt. And they had charged, and I think tissue on the car or invoice on the car, what the dealer paid for it was $182,000, and the list price was $247 or whatever. So it was a good markup, and the man paid $1 million for the car.
And the lemon law doesn't pay them. Do they pay what the customer paid, or do they only pay up to MSRP? They pay what the customer paid.
I think and then Ferrari came to us and said, we lost this case. We're having to buy this car back, and you're paying for half of it. So that was kind of like a crack of the whip. And very shortly thereafter, the F50s were only allowed to be leased by previously owned Ferrari clients. So you couldn't, if I won the lottery, I couldn't walk in there and say I want an F50. They're like, no, you never owned a Ferrari before. You're not getting one. They go, well, how can you do that? I'm going to pay cash. Can't pay cash. You got to.
Well, there's been a few cars like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. But the F50, I remember distinctly because I was front and center for that, and I thought, and they were like, "How can you say that I'm going to pay cash?" I'm like, "Well, no, you can't." So yeah, it was pretty wild.
Now the lease only F50s for the prior Ferrari client, and then that wasn't the only thing required. I mean that the prior Ferrari owner was cost of admission to get talked to about it, and then it was still. Do you have any idea? This is interesting. Do you have any idea? Now, let's say you've got 50 cars and 400 people, prior owners that want one. Then were they interviewed, or who referred them, or how many did they own before? Do you have any idea what the criteria was to get a lease?
I think that you couldn't have any demerits, if you know what I mean. I think you had to be off the radar from a negative standpoint, and they would talk to you. So anybody that had, called customer care, or, I want to speak to the president of the company right now, I'm a valued client, and that kind of thing. They just didn't want to be a part of that negativity. When I say they, I didn't mean my family. I meant Ferrari Factory. North America. Yeah.
Factory told you who you could sell.
Correct.
One,
yeah. And if I remember correctly, we got 2 cars. We were allocated 2 vehicles.
That's a lot.
That's huge. That's twice as many as one, by the way.
From a percentage standpoint.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is so interesting. So dealing with that client, I was never a Ferrari dealer, but I was a Rolls, Bentley, Lotus dealer. So I probably dealt with some of that same clientele. Let's clarify for the audience that never sold cars or, doesn't operate in that space. You say that they didn't necessarily want someone who called and gave the factory grief, I'm an important guy. Just about the entire client list, if not all, were an important guy or gal. And all of them could take out a full-page ad in the New York Times and complain about you. Right. And all of them had a reason that they should get on the list. Or, I've had waiting list cars from time. Prior to Bentley Continental GT, I did not have waiting list cars because I had Silver Spur and Brooklyns and Azure and Continental R's, the big bodies. So I didn't experience that someone asking me to buy till Continental came out, I want to say 04. But they all had the reason that they should first or be on the list or think that you dealt with that nonstop. So now the lease, the customer who leased one, because I didn't know this, did they have first option to buy it at the end or no option to buy it at the end?
Yeah, they had first
started over again.
First option, and it was, as you know, ALG gives out the predetermined price of the car. They insure it. It was a predetermined price. Hey, this is what it's going to be at the end of the lease, and if there's 500 cars built and 500 of them, or 400 of them burned to the ground, that's still the price. It doesn't matter because now there's only 100 left, kind of a thing. So it was like, hey, take it or leave it. We're going to sell it to somebody.
Was that determined at the time of the lease or open end like at the end, and they were worth more than they were original?
I think that it was predetermined. I think it was just here's what the thing is, and it was like it was something that would be very reasonable these days. I want to say it was like $12,000 a month or something like that for a lease price, and it was I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing. I'd be guessing, and I could call a dozen people right now that know exact what the numbers were, but I didn't do my homework.
If you don't,
Yeah,
you don't.
I didn't. I don't recall, but it was when I'm 27 years old, I'm thinking, oh, that's like 10 times what I pay for my mortgage right now, and I mean that's insane per month. But obviously, if they're at that point in their life and they're chosen to lease one of those cars, then
Well, but it's that in that case, it was a cash intendee or cash able customer anyway. So what's the difference?
sure, yeah, 100%.
So I'm asking this in a respectful way, but a playful way. And we were talking about it a little bit at the beginning because the name Shelton. And then in your email signature, I got Molly Maid. How did you end up there?
Well, it's my dad's friends with the guy that brought it from Canada to the United States, golfing buddy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started, existing franchise, so 30 years old here in Fort Myers area, so one of the oldest franchises in the country, based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and just happened to have contact with this gentleman. I started looking for local businesses where I could be my own boss and create my own schedule and work as much as I wanted to, and sent a couple things to my dad and said, what do you think of these? And he's like, why wouldn't you just look at a franchise? It's all structured for you and everything. I said, well, we looked at Molly Maid a few years ago, and it wasn't making as much money as I really need to be comfortable, and I don't want to get another job, kind of a thing. So he called David McKinnon, and he called me back like 5 minutes later. He goes, the Fort Myers location's for sale. The people that own it have owned it for nearly 5 years, and they're in their 70s now, and they're kind of tired, and they'd like to sell it. So their opportunity, and it's almost seemed like it was meant to be. So we've been here 4 years plus.
Are you enjoying it?
I love I love the interaction with clients. I miss the car thing, but I do a lot of racing and a lot of car events. Do some concourse judging and hosting and things like that. So I still get my car fix. And I do enjoy working with people in their home, and I do enjoy working with some people that appreciate making a consistent living. It's fun to look at. It's not with all due respect to my technical folks that I worked with for many years in the car business, they're making good money, and they're needed commodity in our industry, in the car industry. But looking at people that come in and they're working 5 days a week and perhaps leave here and go work another job to make the ends meet, to build and solidify customer relationships, to be able to provide them with a better living is very, very satisfying to me.
That's where the reward is. Is there any of the inner fun? I say that sarcastically. Interdepartmental fighting between, say, your pre-owned car department manager and the service manager about you're not getting my cars in fast enough, but I'm paying you the same rate.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, but and here in the business, there's it's like having the world in your office, because some countries traditionally don't get along with other countries, so they have a preconception. So we try and iron that out early.
So that's where you're the marriage counselor in that.
Yeah, and the primary language in the office is Spanish. And growing up in South Florida, I probably know more Spanish than I'm given credit for. So if I know they're talking about a situation, then I can stop it pretty quickly, make them speak our language.
So I want to go back to, let's talk cars again. So 78 SCCA runoffs. You mind talking to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was there for that, and it I don't remember anything about the race, but I do remember after the race. My two guys that I looked up to the most, obviously my dad and my uncle, that we spent so much time with, starting with racing and just general family get-togethers and things like this. But they were racing constantly. And in 74 was my first runoffs we went to at Road Atlanta. And, a handful of years later, it's 78. My dad has been working so hard. My uncle has been working so hard to develop these Lola Formula racers that they're running. And out of a field of, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 cars, my dad qualifies fourth. And then my uncle qualifies, I think, ninth or 10th. And so, that's pretty good. I mean, having qualified outside the top 10 the last couple of years in a row. And the factory Van Diemen drivers, and Van Diemen was like this, this huge organization out of England. They got two drivers on the front row. So they got the front row locked out. Next to my dad is a guy named David Loring, who's driving the car that Dan Gurney designed, called the Eagle. It was the beginning of his design program. And so it's the two Van Diemens in the front row, David Loring in the Eagle, and my dad in fourth, and my uncle a couple rows back. And so, having some beers the night before, I wasn't, I was 7. And so, Dad and Tom say, hey, you need to get up to me and we can run together. And we just run together as long as we need to. With a couple laps to go, it's every man for themselves. And so the third lap of the race, I've got a picture somewhere of my dad and my uncle running nose to tail through turn 1 at Road Atlanta behind David Loring, running 1, 2, 3. Loring first, my dad second, and my uncle third. They had passed the factory Van Diemen drivers who had faded for whatever reason, set up woes or misfire or whatever it was. 18-lap race, and I think it was 10 or 11 laps into it. The story that I heard was my uncle decided to pull out inside of my dad in turn 1, and they locked wheels, and both cars went sliding off the track, running second and third at the national championship, which is obviously the pinnacle of amateur racing. And so my dad collects the car, ends up finishing, I think, like 11th or whatever. My uncle didn't finish. So I'll give you a little backstory for that, is that we both families would travel in motorhomes. So we had our whole enclosure was with us. So, 34 foot, whatever. The deal was that we would run, one family would run the trailer up and one family would run the trailer back. It was a double decker open trailer. So one Formula Ford was on the top and one was on the bottom. They'd lower the thing, put the big one or put the car up top and raise it and stick the other one on the bottom. So I remember loading the car up, and my dad and my uncle obviously didn't talk. My dad was obviously very upset that he had a chance to compete and maybe get a podium finish. And so we get everything loaded up, and my uncle and his family leave with the trailer because we towed it up there. And my mom was exhausted, so she laid down with my little brother, who was like an infant at the time. And as I normally do, I sat right on the transmission hump of the motorhome, right next to my dad, looking out the front window. And I look out, I'll never forget it, because I thought it was unbelievable that my dad would do something like this to my uncle. And I look out and I said, Dad, that's Uncle Tom. And he says, what? I said, the trailer up there, the truck in the trailer, that's Uncle Tom. And Tom had gotten a flat on the side of the interstate on the trailer. And so we whistled by doing about 70, and my dad held up a number that I'm holding behind my hand right here. And we just kept driving. And I was like, I didn't understand how could that be that serious? And his blood was still boiling from, 5 hours earlier. And so Tom, got home at 4 a.m. or whatever it was, after, all the rusty bolts had broken off on the trailer, and they rode home at 40 miles an hour because they couldn't go faster, et cetera, so on. So I remember that distinctly at 7 years old. And years after that, my dad had saved the trailing arm that was bent. It still had the tire mark in it, so it's meant to be this, and it was like that, and put it on like a piece of wood. Merry Christmas from your little brother. Thanks for the memories, or something like that. It's still floating around somewhere, but they can laugh about it all these years later because they ended up being co-drivers very successfully for many years. But that was a family memory that was kind of raw for a little bit.
So that was the piece that didn't make it to Wild World of Sports at the time.
That's correct, yeah.
So I'm looking at my notes. The new technician that started working at Shelton Shelton Ferrari in the early 2000s, he was what? Kind of a prankster?
The opposite. He was the victim of a lot of pranks, just because he was. I won't name him, but he was a factory guy. He was kind of a guy that worked at the corporate New Jersey office, and a super nice guy. Um, but when you are the new guy in a fraternity, what happens? You get hazed. That's just the way it is. Usually it's 30 guys that go into 120, 120 guy fraternity, and all of those guys get their rocks busted. And anyway, so it was a new guy, and he was bound and determined to prove that he was way more efficient than everybody else. And so he did a timing belt job on a Testarossa. That's a rear subframe out, complete service of the engine, replacing the water pump and the timing belts, and I think it was plugs and wires and things like that. But a full service. They call it a 15K, but it was every 5 years, regardless of the mileage, which is usually the time rather than the miles for that car. And he did it in about a day and a quarter. Like, he was given the car hypothetically on a Wednesday, and about halfway through the morning the next day, he had it running, which was, I admired it because it was like a 40-hour job. He had stayed. He was there after I left, so it wasn't like he cut corners or whatever. Anyway, he looking around the car, got it bolted in, started up, and everything, and so he made the mistake of going to an early lunch, and I witnessed it. I wasn't going to stop it because I knew that they were just doing what they normally do, which was take a bucket of coolant and another bucket of oil and splash it up, because the car was raised off the ground, 6 feet or 7 feet, and they throw oil everywhere and coolant everywhere. And then we go to lunch he's still
That
out.
is brutal. That is brutal.
And came back, and he is like frantic, looking for
Everything's leaking.
and everything's leaking, and nobody's out there, and he's just like, you could see him like wide-eyed, like, what did I do? And he checks everything, and he cleans everything up, and the levels didn't go down. He didn't understand it. And I came over, I'm like, are you okay? He's like, I don't understand what happened. It's like everything was good, it ran good, I ran it to temperature. And I'm like, well, I mean, you see anything wrong with it now? He goes, no. So of course he lowers it down, and one of the other guys says, hey, start it up and rev it up. So he starts it up and revs it up, and of course they got the wrench on the counter, tap, and he turn off. So I think we let him off the hook after 15 minutes of him looking around and check. Oh my gosh, he didn't know how to take it, but it was, hey, if we're not picking on you, we don't like you, kind of a thing. But that was just one of the time, and we were in a neighborhood too. The Ferrari dealership was backed right up to a residential neighborhood, and we used to get in trouble all the time by the neighbors. They call the police, a couple times a week, and revving up loud race car engines out the garage door, and then slamming the door shut and watching them, jumping over the fence trying to get to us and stuff. I mean, it was, if there was cell phone cameras back then, I'm pretty sure that I would have been arrested, because I wasn't doing anything illegal really, but we were having a lot of fun making fun of the neighbors. So
I used to get the calls from the neighbors behind the dealership, and also, and you may have heard this too, some test drive complaints.
yeah, yeah. We used to have to run emissions, and nobody was willing to do the emissions tests in any of the customers' cars or any of our company cars or in stock vehicles. So we would have to go get them probed. And Al Roberts, who still works there and is one of the senior members of the Ferrari community, one of the most well-respected Ferrari restoration technicians in the world, I would imagine. I mean, he was when I left in 2008, and 15 years later. But you'd go to my uncle or my dad and say, hey, I need Junior to take this car to emissions, and he would hand me the keys to an F40. I'm like 27. So I'd have to run it down to 595, which is the cross street, the cross expressway to get across the state. And I'd have to run it up 95 to get it to temperature so that it would actually go into a little bit, it wouldn't run rich, so that it would pass
Leaner, right.
emissions. Exactly. So, I had specific instructions to just run the crap out of it. And so I did. And a couple times pulled over. Hey, you're not supposed to be driving that fast. So I could drive it in third gear and do 85, 90 miles an hour in one of those things. And one particular occasion, I lost this chin spoiler that had been knocked loose, and it rattled up underneath the car and caught some of the fiberglass under there. We weren't running carbon then, but that was an expensive visit. So it wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything. But
so when you explain to the cops, listen, I'm not speeding. I'm just warming up the car for an emissions test. Get you anywhere?
It does, because I used to carry business cards with me. Probably the most prominent one is I was actually working in Naples, and this did involve a Ferrari. It belonged to a very good client of ours named Murphy Coles, and he lived in Naples. His family was in Naples, but he had a 512M, which is kind of a later version of the Testarossa, 12-cylinder in the back, big 5-liter, and he needed service done on the car. And I was working late in Naples, and I was to drop the vehicle off in in Fort Lauderdale on Saturday morning, and then catch a ride back over to work the sales floor in Naples. So back when they didn't have SunPass, you'd throw your 75 cents in the bucket. So I go up through the box, first, second, third, fourth, and I'm just winding the thing out. The complaint was that he was disappointed with the performance of the car. So I didn't see the cop, but I did see him in my rear view, and he pulled me over, and I pulled off to the side of the road, very respectful as I always am to the Leos. And he looked at me and he goes, "License, registration, please." And I pulled out the registration. I gave him my license, and I handed him a business card. And these real cool glossy cards. It actually had a Testarossa on it. And he goes, "Why are you giving me your business card?" And I said, "Well, if you look, the license doesn't match the registration. This is actually a client's vehicle." And he actually was wearing glasses, and he did this. He goes, "You mean to tell me that you're doing 158 on my highway in somebody else's vehicle?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "What are you doing? And does he know?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm transporting it across the state to our dealership on the East Coast. The customer's stating that he is unhappy with the performance of the vehicle." He goes, "Well, do you want me to call him? Because I'll call him and tell him this thing hauls ass." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Were you in fifth gear?" I said, "No, sir. I would just shifted into fourth gear." And he went like this, and he said, "Slow down." "Yes, sir." And watched him peel away, and I peeled away, and I thought, wow. I always heard that if you were going over 100 miles an hour, you're going to jail. Yeah, well, that was significantly higher than jail. And if I'm lying, I'm dying right now, because I didn't realize the significance of the situation. I mean, you lose a tire at 158 miles an hour, you're all set. You're going to end up in one of those ponds or one of those rivers on the side of the turnpike or the alligator alley. So, but that was a.
Or imagine hitting an alligator crossing.
Yeah, that's happened. Not by me, but I've seen it.
Well, I've been pulled over once or twice, because when we're showing these cars or testing these cars, it's, you're not trying to be a big shot. It's just top of second gear, like you said, it can already be right.
Yeah.
But I've gotten out of, I don't know, I mean, ultimately that I got threatened with a ticket, but how about let's put that I ended up offering police opportunities to drive if they'd come by later or another day and let go.
That's awesome. I like that a lot.
So keep that in the back of your mind when if you ever end up. So now I'm looking at the notes, and it says that you were the service manager at Shelton in the late 90s when the restoration tech Al Roberts stored an engine for the fourth car ever built by the Ferrari factory. Please, I mean, I don't care who you are. That's got to be interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and I was given a pretty quick education. The Ferrari factory, the first handful of vehicles, and I don't know what number it went up to, and I could call 10 people and get the answer, but they would alternate identification numbers. So 001 was a street car, 002 was a race car, 003 was a street car, 004 was a race car. And so 004C was a 166mm that was owned by Jim Clark, still owns it as far as I know. And it had a complete restoration done. We did the engine. We didn't do the coach work. But I spoke to him on a monthly basis because he would run a checkup. We'd run a bill up for him, and I'd just call him. I had a credit card on file. And we handcrafted all of the pistons that needed to be rebuilt. There was some similarities to some motorcycle pistons that would work with regards to the bore and the strength of the engine. It was a 12-cylinder engine, of course, a V12. And so Al built that from scratch, and it was thousands of hours, getting things built and kind of reimagined because they weren't that efficient back in the 40s. And it's still hustling around. I think Mr. Clark's dad owned that car. He owned the Long Island Automotive Museum, and that was part of their personal collection. But Jim Clark was the founder of Netscape, which is one of the most successful internet browsers ever. You know, you've got Google Chrome now and Safari for Apple, but Netscape was one of the first ones, include like AOL as well. So it was neat to talk to him because I would call and his secretary would answer after I faxed over a bill where we're at. I faxed over the invoice. And we had a punch list that we would go through, and I had to lock my doors so that nobody would interrupt us. And it was quite literally a 2.5 to 3 minute conversation. And back in the late '90s, right around 2000, running a credit card for 18 or 20 grand, and for parts and
per call.
Oh yeah, per call, yeah. And I would send them over and have them promptly done. He was just like wanted an update on where we were with a particular item for the engine. And then we started working hand in hand with the people that were doing the coach work. And I can't remember where that was being done, but it was elsewhere. It was like up in New Jersey or something.
Oh, Classic Coach, maybe.
It might have been them. Yeah.
Yeah. And Onofrio.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And sent, we started corresponding with them to try and, liaise and get the car put back together. And that happened after I left. But it was really neat to be a part of the process and see the passion. And I think I ended up seeing that car. I went to Cavallino, and I think Mr. Clark brought the car there as a completed item. And I thought, hey, I think I put my hands on that engine a few times. So it was really neat to be a part of that.
Now, I guess I can't count it as a sale because I didn't deliver it. You sold the first Porsche Carrera GT.
I did, in Florida.
I thought I sold the first Bugatti.
Oh, which one?
First.
Ever.
But I didn't deliver it. There was a land developer in Naples. Very mean and cantankerous. Did I start ringing a bell? Let me know. His wife wore a $1 million wedding ring, and she let me know after she'd tell me what a bastard he was and don't put up with his shit about how much the ring was worth. But I was dealing with them on a number of cars, and you know how it is. You start getting personal with your clients, and you become their person, and whatever car's coming out, they ask you about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be your make. So Bugatti Veyron, Bugatti was coming to United States, and they were naming, we didn't even know where the stores were going to be. I think it was 2 stores. And I had an offer written. I wasn't going to be a dealer, but I just figured I would know who it is and broker the deal and whatever. And at $1,250,000, subject to not to exceed $1,250,000, I had a deposit on the car. It took a lot longer. It never happened, and I don't think they came in that cheap.
You get it done?
No, I didn't deliver the car.
Oh, it wasn't because you didn't try.
I was all excited that I could say that I was selling the first Bugatti. So no, the price kept creeping up. Anyway, I'm like, look, it's only a little more than your wife's ring. I mean, what's the big deal?
Yeah, come on now. Get off your wallet.
But you sold the first GT, Porsche Carrera GT.
Yes.
To Preston Head.
Mr. Preston, yeah, one of my longtime clients. I've always enjoyed spending time with him because I'm a closeted redneck. I I'd rather be in flip flops than dress shoes. Um, so the deal was is that we started taking orders. We had a Porsche store in Naples, and a neat little boutique store. It wasn't very, wasn't going to compete with all the big stores, Champion or anything like that. It wasn't going to be that big. But Porsche is a very desired brand, still is, always will be. And we took an order, and the order was I think it was like I think it was like a $50,000 deposit, and we started. I think we had like 12 or 13 deposits, and the guy that had the deposit down, I called him and I said, "Hi, sir. Just want to let you know that we just received an allocation for a Carrera GT. We need you to come in and help us design your car. We've got all the color swatches and, about this, leather samples and all that." And so he made an appointment with us to come by a couple days later, sat down with his wife, and they looked at stuff and picked out the baseball glove interior, that real bright orange, like Georgia clay, and over gray. It was a really pretty car. And called him and said, "Hey, they've allocated the car. Hey, they're building the car. Hey, they're shipping the car. Hey, the car's here." And he called me back and he says, "Steve, I can't take delivery of the car." I said, "What? Have we done something wrong?" And he says, I'm in the middle of a divorce." I said, "Okay." And he says, "I can't acquire anything else. My attorney forbids me and tells me that it's not going to go well." And fortunately, I didn't really understand. Just didn't understand. So, well, can we hold it for you? Or, so we started calling down the list. He said, "I realize," the order guy says, "I realize that you got $50,000 of my money. Keep it. If you have to take $1 off, take the dollar out of my 50 and give me back what's left." So we just start calling down the list. Second, third, fourth, fifth. We got all the way to the 12th and start turning around circles. I was in charge of the car. And my dad is a very, very humble, quiet. He doesn't ever get excited about stuff. And he showed up at the sales meeting about 2 weeks later. And it was, "I want this bleeping car gone by the end of the day. I don't give a damn what it takes. I'm not paying for more floor plan on this car. Get it gone now." I'm like racking my brain. I'm like, who can I? Oh, so I don't know if you know Bud Root from Ferrari. He was my uncle's roommate at University of Miami, obviously back in the 60s and 70s, 60s. And I called Bud and I said, "Hey, do you have Preston's cell phone number?" He goes, "Yeah. What are you gonna do?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna try and sell him a Carrera GT." He goes, "Oh, he'll like that. He's got all the other cars." I go, "All right." So it's like 9:15 after the sales meeting. My dad's up in his office, trying to calm down. Ring the phone. I call the phone. The phone rings and, "Hello?" And I said, "Hello, Mr. Henn? Who's this?" And I said, "It's Steve Shelton Jr." And I can hear a bunch of ruckus in the background. He goes, "Who?" And I think, "Oh no, he doesn't remember me." And I said, "Steve Shelton Jr." "Steve, are you okay, son?" With the North Carolina draw. I said, "Yes, sir. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm out in Vegas playing the slots with my wife. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" And I said, "Sir, do you have a Carrera GT?" He goes, "What?" I said, "Do you have a Porsche Carrera GT?" He goes, No, the supercar." And I said, "Yes, sir. I got an Enzo I got from you." And I said, "Yes, sir. I've got a Porsche Carrera GT. It's brand new. It's got less than 20 miles on it. Do you want it?" "What color is it?" I said, "It's gray." And he goes, "I got that cool orange interior in it?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, well, I don't pay sales tax, right? I got my dealer's license. So call Cliff, call Cliff and let him know that I'm getting another car and organized transport and he'll get the money to you. Okay, buddy? How's your mama?" I said, "Good, he's good. She's good." I'm thinking, holy shit. This just happened in 90 seconds after some niceties. And he said, "Well, how much is it?" I said, "It's $448,300. "Okay, don't charge him sales tax. I'll get you my number, okay?" I said, "Okay." He goes, "All right, son, good talking to you." I said, "Well, good luck, sir." He goes, "Thank you." And hung up
What
the
a
phone.
sweetheart. What a
And
sweetheart.
I walked up to my dad and I shut the door. I said, "I just sold your Carrera GT." And he says, "What?" I go, "Yeah, I called Preston and sold your Carrera GT." He goes, "Holy shit. I can't believe I didn't think of that." He goes, "Well, he didn't argue with the price or anything?" I said, "No, he told me he's not paying sales tax." He goes, I don't give a shit. We got to get rid of it. 450 grand, 450 grand. And so I followed the car over there on a transport. They came and picked it up with their own truck and delivered it right to his little compound right at the swap shop on Oakland Park Boulevard and 441. And he was always, very genuine and, never forgot where he came from. But that was a really fun story. I still tell that story quite a bit.
When you're telling that story, I'm thinking of my own client who reminds me that, who your description of him reminds me of. But here's a thing that I got out of selling exotic cars. I mean, I always fell in love with I always love customers regardless of type of car. I mean, when I was selling the Lincolns and the Mercuries and the Cadillacs that we were talking about, these were the World War II vets, and I learned a lot of great, they would guess how long we've been married. They were so proud of certain things. But the exotic car client, well, first of all, when we got the Rolls and Bentley franchise, our new rep, Uncle Guz from Spain, first of all, piled us into a 98 Continental R British Racing Green, and I'm going to give you an easy car to sell. And of course, he gave us some age unit talking to us about our branded goods display, the glass counter that he thought should go in parts, but he said, oh no, we've got to go in the showroom because a man could come in with his wife or perhaps another day his girlfriend.
I don't know anything about that.
Like not even like a second thought, and I'm coming off the World War II vets driving Grand Marquis, So what I'd learned about the exotic car customer, when they were impressive, I found that they were more impressive because they lived in an entourage kind of a world where nobody's giving them very rarely are they getting legitimate feedback. Everything's how great they are or how smart they are, or yes, sir, they're CEOs, they're whatever, they're entertainers, they're athletes, whatever they are, right? So for someone to stay as humble as Mr. Preston and as genuine when he's got people around him handling all of his stuff, to me, I mean, an impressive person is an impressive person, but to me, that's even more impressive because he's growing in such a vacuum that, for a tree to grow this way because of the wind or because of the sun or whatever, they're not getting feedback. They're in a vacuum or everything they do is good because of the people around them or the hangers-on. You know what I mean? So I have so many people that I'm thinking of in a warm way, as you described this fella, and there were plenty of jerks. I don't have to tell you that either. But the ones that were impressive, fella that you described to me was times 100, because what they had to have inside of themselves from a fiber standpoint without someone else slapping them saying you were a jerk last night, because no one did that to them. Your behavior modifies for your family or friends like mine does. Because someone said you were a butthole, or you hurt that person's feelings, and you're like, oh my God, but a lot of these people, no one gave them any negative feedback
because they were scared they were going to lose their lifeline. Yeah.
So I love that, and I had a guy that first name Orville was an asphalt paving guy who, to the day he died, ran the steamroller or whatever. When they from Indiana. That I could also call, but with odd car, what kind of car someone like. So he wouldn't be an Enzo or a Carrera GT guy, but he'd be a Rolls Chinese Eye or, anything, odd. And had probably 30 something of these cars indoors. But I could call him like that, and it was the same kind of conversation, always the same, just exactly that conversation. And the same thing. If he wanted it or if they wanted it, it was just like a matter of logistics. So I always said that selling cars was a marketing job. Selling a car got in the way. And your relationship, I'm looking at my notes, Mr. Preston, the marketing job, I'll put in air quotes, was the relationship that you continued to maintain with them, the way you took care of them. Sale was just the thing that got in the way of all of that, because we'd stay in touch with these customers, and they had itchy trigger fingers, so you'd sell them, obviously, certain customers easily a few times a year, right? Something. But there might have been a lot of care along the way, but the transactions weren't that hard when that was there. Very often, maybe not always quite like that.
Well, I had taken care of Preston on the service side at Ferrari, so he knew me well growing up, and then he was confused, and then it was just, not to say that sales, that relationship is important too, where they come back every 18 months, or you call them on a perspective, like you said with your Chinese eye guy, and said, "Hey, I got this car. Does it make sense to you?" And they go, "Yeah, I love that car." Yeah, that's fun when you have that.
I got something your color, like whatever, right? But this beautiful thing about your service relationship is, you were like legitimately taking care of them, and coming from the sales side, from the variable side, you guys were my lifeblood. I know it sounds a little cliche that service makes the second sale, but I was very, very, very fortunate that our customers had relationships in our service department unreal, Thank God, because it sure made it easy when it was time for them to. Now, you were hired by BBC's Top Gear.
Correct. So phone rings. One of my best buddies, Doug Smith, is working for Derek Bell's son, Justin, who's a great guy, and Mr. Bell is as well. And Doug and I are very close. I talked to him twice today. And he calls me and he says, "Call me back. You owe me." And so I call him back, and I'm thinking he's got a racing gig for me. This is ended like spring of 2006 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And I call him back and I said, "Hey man, what's up?" And he says, "Are you busy on the so-and-so day?" And I said, "It's far enough out. I should be fine unless I got jury duty that I don't know about." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I got a call from Moroso Motorsports Park. They gave my number to BBC because they're running Top Gear has rented the track to do an episode of the show there." And I was embarrassed to say I'd heard of the show, but I'd never watched it. Just having been immersed in the car business so much, I didn't read magazines, I didn't watch TV shows involving cars, I didn't do any of that. I just was involved in it so much.
No kidding, because wow, what a cult following! Yeah,
it was like it's like changing your oil on your car when you work on cars all day. I work with technicians. Like, I don't even want to do that. I'm just gonna pay somebody to do it, and I'll be done with it anyway. So I said, "Okay." He goes, "I'll call this girl back and give her your number." I said, "Sure." So 5 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's one of the producers calling me from England. So I make an appointment to go up to Moroso, meet with these these two fellows with BBC. And I have a Land Rover demo because I'm a service director at Land Rover Fort Lauderdale at the time. Drive them around the track a few times. We just got to get to know each other. And they said, "Well, we think you're a perfect fit. Sounds like you're been around this track a handful of times." And I had just let my FIA license elapse. And my understanding was their plan was to put me in the driver's suit and have me drive some high performance American cars, a Steeda Mustang, which is a local brand over here, Callaway Corvette, or, Hennessy Viper or something. I don't know what the plans were, but because I didn't have my international license, they couldn't get insurance coverage. So they amended, pardon me, the plan, and went and bought $1,000 cars from a buy here, pay here, just outside of Miami Airport when they arrived. So each of the characters, the guys on the show, James and Jeremy and the hamster, I think they bought a Cadillac, a Dodge Ram pickup truck, and like a Z28. And so I show up the day of the filming, and they're standing there, and they all show up. And this guy reaches in this box and pulls out this driver's suit, this white driver's suit that is right over there with my name on it. And I go, "Man, that thing looks big." I'm a big kid now. I'm in my 50s though, and this was 15 years ago. And I said, "Man, that thing looks really big." They said, "Put this on underneath it," and it was like a pregnancy suit. with like a big belly on it and boobs and the whole deal. And I looked at him, I said, I'm not wearing that. They had measured me for a suit, but they added like 10 inches around the waist so that I would look more American. Well, even though I have a lot of English friends, very close English friends, they call that in England, they call that taking the piss, which means just busting balls. Like, just, hey, man, we're just, I'm going to be tomorrow. You're going to pick on me tomorrow. But right now we're picking on you and you're a big kid and you're American. So they wanted somebody more American. So I said, I'm not doing it. You can find somebody else. And the producer grabbed me by the shoulder and walked me to the side and said, hey, I don't know if you read that little short contract that you read or that you signed, but it says that if you're the reason that their production is delayed, you're in charge of all the charges for, and the track's not available for another 20 days. So you're either going to pay for all the plane flights and all the hotels and and we can sue you for it. And I looked at him, I said, dude, man. So I was anonymous. So put the tubby suit on, put the Stig suit on, put on the helmet they gave me, and I drove 3 piece of shit cars around Moroso. Then it was PBR. Now it's defunct. And it was fun. My buddy Doug was there. Another friend, Aaron Weiss, was there. That was me. It was hotter than blue blazes. It was like beginning of July in Palm Beach, and there was not a whisper of any sort of breeze. And I'm wearing a 3-layer race suit with with a pregnancy suit underneath it, which I don't need anymore, by the way. And so it was an
Now the
experience.
suit fits beautifully.
Yeah, I retired it. I got it. I got it dry cleaned and hung it up across my office. But it was a really neat experience. 2 of the guys were really, really kind, and there was one that was not kind. And I'll leave it at that. And I might get in trouble for this interview, but I don't care. They can come get me for everything I'm worth, including the suit.
So, Steve, awesome, man. Awesome. So, what would we be surprised to know about Steve Shelton Jr.?
I'm probably the funniest guy that you know. I've been told by many people that, including my dad. My dad is still disappointed that I didn't pursue acting or stand up or both. I get my sense of humor from my mom. Her family is just bizarre, and I've got a quick wit that more days that go on, I realize that gift that not a lot of people have. So I enjoy sharing that gift with other people and making them laugh. It's one of my favorite things. Going fast, having a cold beer, and making people laugh. Aside from obviously family joy, but it's really fun to make people laugh. To recall funny things happened 15 minutes ago. To bust on my English buddies at the pub, and yeah, it's just I really enjoy it. I miss it if it doesn't happen. So if I go racing, I'm the life of party. I'll tell you that.
And what would you want people to know about you?
Not everybody that grows up in a very very blessed environment don't recognize you have to be kind to people in the world. You can't just kind of put blinders on, and I'm above that, So I grew up very blessed, with a family that didn't need anything really, and I just never. I always look at people in their eyes and just know that they're the same as me. I'm the same as them, and just because I grew up in a nice house around nice people, that didn't need anything doesn't mean that I don't know that something I'm happy to help. I'm happy to provide, and I don't want to say anything other than I really enjoy this business because I can provide for some people that really, really enjoy it. Respect me for stopping and asking about their kids, and like we had a lady that was displaced from a home, and before I could organize anything, all of the ladies in my office got together and gathered stuff for her, new appliance, new beds, new dressers, new everything. Because I said, we need to get together and do this. And my team went ahead and got everything done before I could even lift a finger or pull out my wallet. They had extra bed. They had an extra dresser. It was so neat to see, I mean, it's like, like I said, always have people that are smarter and more motivated than you are. And it was really neat to experience that. And it made me feel good about the team that I've got here at Molly Maid.
Very proud of them. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.